You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
I want to introduce our first guest for the program today, and a returning guest, Jeffrey Anderson. And Jeffrey, first of all, I know you wear numerous hats, as we all do, and you represent the 2017 project, and so it's great to have you back, and thank you for doing what you do with that. But could you please just, well, first of all, hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I get so carried away sometimes, but if you don't mind, if you could just, for our audience, because 2017 project is new to many of us, and even though you've been on, it's always good to just tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing, just to refresh their minds.
Yeah, the 2017 project is a group that I run, and Bill Crystal is chairman of the board, and we're putting forward a conservative governing agenda for the year 2017, the next time we can really do a great deal of good. And the core of our agenda that we've been advancing has been an alternative to Obamacare, which any of your listeners can see at the 2017 Project website, which is www.2017project.org.
Oh, that's excellent, and of course that's something that John and I are always looking at, from one election to another. But the types of policy and things that we should be looking at, and I guess conservative-minded as we are, which is why we read so much of the stuff that you and your other fellow writers do. But we have you on here for one particular subject, and again, it couldn't be more timely. I received the email from the 2017 project, and I saw what you were working on, and this is something that's really been bothering me. Not just the comments of Jonathan Gruber, but what's interesting to me is his name has come up over the years. I don't think he's not a new individual. We've been discussing him. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it goes back to 2009 or 10, the first time Nancy Pelosi even mentioned his name. And I might be a little off with that date. But he's not a new name, and it's like all of a sudden we're supposed to pretend like, oh, this is new news. But what he said is shocking, and I'm glad he said it because it's a reminder to everyone that, one, how bad Obamacare is and how bad it was sold to the American people, and in fact it was like fraudulently sold. But it's a reminder to help you guys, because we have another election that we're going to work towards, and this is perfect. I mean, this is how many different campaign ads could you guys write off of this?
Yeah, it really is amazing. I mean, I always think back to the night of the House vote on March 21st, 2010. Paul Ryan gave a great 5-minute speech on talking about how the arrogance of the Obama administration and its allies was just unbelievable in pushing this bill, which was so obviously full of smoke and mirrors in terms of the scoring that they managed to finagle out of the Congressional Budget Office, and Jonathan Gruber was at the heart of all of that. He was the guy who had put together this modeling system that sources on the Hill say was the basis, or at the very least a basis, for the CBO's own scoring of Obamacare. And Gruber had done a great deal of work on Romney Care, and then the Obama administration paid him $400,000 or thereabouts to work with them and didn't bother to disclose it. And then at every turn he was using his model and coming up with figures, and the administration would tweak this and tweak that and see what kind of score they could get out of the CBO as a result. And all the while he was writing these things as if he wasn't being paid by the administration, and he was saying, oh, this is just such a wonderful piece of legislation. This is so good. And then all these other people would jump on board, and Paul Krugman and Ezra Klein and people like that, and then Harry Reid on the floor of the Senate, and Nancy Pelosi on the floor of the House would say, oh, we can tell it's great because Jonathan Gruber, this impartial MIT economist, says it's great. He was at the heart of it all. And to have him now say, lack of transparency is a huge political advantage, and especially when you're dealing with the stupidity of the American voter. I mean, it really ties it all up in a pretty nice bow right after this election where Obamacare was so clearly rebuked.
Making a statement like the stupidity of the American people isn't that much different from like the statement that Romney ended up getting in trouble for with regards to the 99 percenters. you know, when you make these blanket statements, which are really, you know, even if they're meant to be harmless, which I don't think in the case of Gruber it was meant to be harmless, but how do you tell one half or the other of the country that, hey, you guys are idiots and we're not, or we are, you aren't? And I mean, that's a really tough thing to walk away from. And quite frankly, it would be nice if some of the American people who have been supporting the agenda of this one particular party that sold us this bill, and if they would wake up a little bit and start actually listening to some of the things, as you pointed out in the podcast you put out the other day, that we've been saying since this bill was even discussed. I mean, it really is amazing. It's like we act like, oh, this is all new to us. No, we've all been saying the same thing for 6 years now. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is a tax. There's a list of 20, 30 different types of taxes if you really break them all down. I mean, but there's so many pieces that, you know, they come up and then it's like, oh, this is new. I'm like, no, it's not. We're saying this for 6 years. And Jeff, I'm sure you've been writing about it for 6.
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's been most of what I've been doing ever since 2009, and I mean, it's been pretty obvious from the beginning. This was 2,700 pages of federal largesse, of arguably unprecedented effort to consolidate and centralize power and control and money in Washington, D.C. And you see the sort of arrogant attitude that underlies such a mission in the statements from Gruber. And you know, it's obviously insulting and inaccurate for him to refer to Americans as being stupid. But I think what's also been shown across the last 5 years, and was shown again on Election Day 2 weeks ago or whatever it was, that the American people have a lot more wisdom than the Obama administration does. And from the start, they've been able to smell a rat with this thing. I mean, it wasn't really very hard. It's obviously been a giant federal clunker from the start. And I mean, the real foolishness in all of this is the Obama administration thinking that they can control everything and all of us. And I do think slowly but surely we're going to start seeing some Democratic defections. I mean, there were already a few Democratic ads run in the last election saying they were anti-Obamacare. Almost no Democratic ads saying they were pro-Obamacare. So I think the floodgates could start to open with another election like the last one, if that's what happens in 2016.
Well, at the very least, we'll just pick up even more seats, and that would be great. Jeff, 2 quick questions before I hand you off to John. One is, when you look at just the general theme of this idea that, you know, it's like we know better than you do, just trust us. First of all, I think that's dangerous, and this doesn't just apply to Obamacare. It seems like there's so many different things that the government tries to do or a political party will put out there, and they create something, try to sell you on it. But is it really, I mean, are they really doing us a favor by not having the real debate and bringing things forward? And I'll use the word transparency, because we have a president currently who ran on transparency, and it seems like he never really wanted to be transparent about the things that were contained in this bill. And no. So that would be the first. That would. I'll let you answer that. Sorry.
Well, as far, I mean, I'm not sure which aspect of that you want me to address. I mean, I think on the transparency piece, it certainly has not been transparent at all. I mean, I think there's a remarkable disconnect between his pledges to be the most transparent administration in history and what we've seen actually transpire. I'll let you ask the other part of your question.
Oh yeah. Well, what I was going to say is, it seems to me that, and unfortunately, a lot of the schools have professors that are like this, that are very liberal-minded. I'll call them like almost, I don't know, like, what's the word, egotistical? Again, where they think that their ideas, like just earth-shattering, world-breaking, nothing else is going to work. It has to be theirs. It doesn't matter how it gets sold. Everyone else is wrong. But we have a lot of young people who sit in the classrooms of these types of professors. And I think that's what makes it very difficult for people like you and I to talk about our ideas and sell them to someone who's young, and not necessarily willing to listen to us on how the guy that they've been listening to is wrong. And I think that it seems to be changing, by the way. I think that some of the numbers in the polling have been turning over the last couple elections as a result of reality. But I think that's another big issue as well.
Well, it is a disadvantage, certainly, to have colleges and universities across America just filled with these liberal professors who basically indoctrinate students, and there's no question that's something that has to be overcome. Conservatives start at a disadvantage because of that. I think it's sort of in a way, it's like the heydays of the 60s left in the universities now, as the folks who were the campus radicals then are in the positions of power now. And but it's just something that has to be dealt with. As far as the overarching philosophy that they espouse, I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's a question of they believe essentially everything needs to be controlled by the federal government in one way or another. I mean, I don't mean to overstate it, but to a large degree, the entire philosophy is rooted in coercion. I mean, if President Obama thinks, health insurance is not affordable, so let's force insurance companies to offer different sorts of insurance at different sorts of prices. We want companies to offer insurance, so let's just compel them. Let's say they have to do it. Americans aren't buying insurance, so let's just compel them to do it. Let's say you have to buy insurance. I mean, at every step, it's not a very nuanced philosophy. It's a philosophy that's really all about coercion and force and telling people what they have to do, and doing it at the federal level, where certainly the American founders did not want this sort of power and control consolidated in the nation's capital.
Jeff, there's an interesting parallel here to look at, which is that we have essentially leaders across the Democratic aisle who are really rightfully taking Gruber to task, but they're not taking him to task for what was done. It was more taking him to task for being stupid enough to admit it in a moment of candor. It sounded like he was actually bragging, right? I know the president, my kids, I'm on the phone, but which is fine. That's human nature. But the fact of the matter is, they're not upset with what they've done. They're upset that they got caught with their pants down. And this, I think, is very important. I want to make a transition. First, a comparison I want to get your sense on. This ideological difference that we're dealing with, I think it's very important that the American public look at the models that we're looking for. It's nice, it sounds great to say everything's covered, no worry, we got everything handled for you. Just wake up in the morning and smile, and Uncle Sam will take good care of you. But if you look at the European model that we keep moving closer and closer to, Europe is failing. I mean, Europe, I go there all the time, but let's face it, Europe is shrinking in every stretch of the word. If it wasn't for the fact that you put them together as a union, only about 3 countries there would actually stand on their own and as a world-class nation. And Europe is shrinking, and even their population is shrinking. I mean, they're really shrinking and diminishing in every way against competitive powers. Why would we ever want to emulate what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, certainly Europe is not in its heyday, but I think the good side in all this is that the Obama administration has been, we talk about the classroom effect of people going in and being taught by these liberal professors. The sort of broader classroom, if you will, of our entire society, and watching how government has interacted with society across these last 6 years, it's been a rather clear lesson to the American people. I think it's becoming clearer by the month that this liberal project is not what most Americans want. I mean, this has been a wonderful lesson in the merits of liberty and limited government. That's not what Obama intended to teach, but I think he's done the best job of teaching it since Ronald Reagan, and inadvertently, and arguably even he may have driven the lesson home even more than Reagan did. We'll have to see, but and I think it's certainly the time for conservatives and for Republicans to step forward and build upon those gains. But there's a lot to be thankful for in terms of how the American public views the federal government and the overreaching tentacles of that government in relation to how they were viewing it, say, in November of 2008.
Well, it's an interesting analogy because you could say that Reagan advised us that it would be a bad idea if we get burned, whereas Obama just stuck our finger right in the fire. In some ways, that may have been more impactful and immediate, especially on young people.
Not exactly acting chastened now either.
No, exactly. Now, if we look at, because here's one of, I think, the biggest worries that we face right now. The DNC has been in the GOP in the undermine the DNC mode. But the fact of the matter is, we need to be able to, as a party, clearly articulate a better plan and give them something to say in very clear and simple terms. This is why empowering individuals and empowering free markets will solve these problems. I worry that if the GOP, especially there's so many calls for impeachment right now, to me that's a huge distraction. Unless you're serious about bringing him up on criminal charges and removing him from office, all you're going to do is play into their hands and possibly buoy them for 2016. We need to show why our founding fathers' form of governance is actually better. And, of course, George Bush failing to do that and being basically a big government guy himself is, to a large extent, why we got Obama. So I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree. I mean, I think that either extreme in terms of responding to Obama is bad. I mean, we need to show a real spine, but impeaching him or making any move toward that, I think, is crazy. When he's more than 6 years in, he's unpopular. I mean, why do we want to make Joe Biden an incumbent at the time of the next election? I mean, it just... And there's really not the numbers for it in the Senate. The other extreme, I think, of Congress just saying, we just don't know what to do when President Obama lawlessly decides to do whatever he wants. And even though, the American founders gave us, Congress, more powers than any other branch of government, all we can think of to do is run to the Supreme Court and say, we want to sue Obama for violating the separation of powers. I mean, that's crazy. That is so weak and pathetic, worse than nothing for Congress to do that. So I think the rightful middle ground is in the middle, where you show some spine, you use the powers of Congress, you refuse to use the power of the purse, and you refuse to fund these things. I mean, there's no way that the House and Senate, the Republicans, should be allowing Obama to have the money to grant a lawless amnesty unilaterally, to do the various other things that he's trying to do outside of the rule of law and the way that our Constitution has set things up. So I think people need to be smart about that sort of thing and also courageous. And then it's on the first point you made about actually having something that Republicans or conservatives are for, I think that is crucial. I mean, otherwise you kind of give the impression that you think everything was just perfect before the latest round of efforts by the liberals to make things worse. And the truth is, like, take Obamacare. I mean, it's not like things were perfect before Obamacare went into effect. There were things the federal government had already broken in our healthcare system, and I think the focus should be on fixing those while repealing all of Obamacare and thereby moving us in a conservative direction from the pre-Obamacare status quo. And that's what we try to do in the 2017 project alternative to Obamacare. So I think it's crucial to put forward these sorts of things. I think an alternative to Obamacare is the number one most important thing to put forward, because that's how you get to full repeal.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, except for I'd add one quick thing. I believe that I've read numerous bills by a handful of doctors who are members of Congress, at least in the House, who've put out, whether it just be one or two items in Obamacare or actual full bills. I think they've actually worked on creating their own ideas to fix some of the issues in healthcare. And I think they're actually some of the people we should listen to, because they're not just lawyers, they're not just, people from the private sector or from whatever sector or from the government sector, but they're actually people who've been involved for many years in healthcare. I'll give you Phil Rowe as an example. So I think that we have put out ideas. I think that outside of a handful of media outlets, they've been ignored and not even discussed. So it seems like we haven't.
Well, I think you're right in a sense. I mean, people like Dr. Tom Price in the House has
yes, absolutely
has been solid on this. You've got, in terms of like incoming senators, Ben Sass coming in from Nebraska has a background in, he basically ran the in-house think tank at Health and Human Services and certainly knows these issues. And these are the kind of people I think we ought to be looking to for leadership going forward. And some ideas have been put out there, but I think I think the general sense is mostly right, that conservatives or Republicans haven't really come very close to uniting around an alternative. And at the end of the day, when you get to the election of November 2016, which is going to be such a fateful one in these matters, the American people are going to look at the choice as being Obamacare or whatever the Republicans have put out there. Now, Republicans can put out just a few bills here and there that an individual member is champion, and most Americans just won't be familiar with them. Or they can unite behind something that hopefully the presidential candidate will be championing, but hopefully Congress will have been very actively involved in creating and forming, and then you've got a real choice. You've got a clear decision. I think essentially any sort of well-conceived conservative alternative to Obamacare would beat Obamacare in the court of public opinion.
John?
Yeah, Jeff, I think one of the things that would be worthwhile to try to put in here is, look, it's my contention that the GOP didn't win this election, that the DNC lost this election at the federal level. I believe at the state level, though, the governor's races, I think, was a very different story, especially given some of the shocks. I think the governors. So my premise here is that would it not be in the GOP's best interest to try to bring the governors into the fold and not just make this a Congress in a vacuum, but bring those two pieces together and explain how important a 50-state experiment is versus just one, overarching dictatorial one-size-fits-all plan.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think clearly that is part of the core aspect of the conservative limited government philosophy, is that good government tends to be government that's relatively close to the people, and in addition, if you don't like what your local government is doing, you can move and you can escape it. I don't even think we need just state control, but local control is much more ideal, and we certainly don't need one-size-fits-all federal control where there really is no escape. So I think looking to the states is good. There's obviously some innovative folks in the states, some people that have put up a good fight, Scott Walker and many others, and they did very well the other night. At the same time, I think in general, I would hope that any sort of Obamacare alternative that starts working its way through Congress is something that would minimize the federal role and leave a great deal of operating room for the states. But the basic fact of the matter is, because we have this 2,700 pages of federal legislation we have to get rid of first before we can do anything else. There is a clear federal role now in getting rid of this, and also in fixing what the federal government had already broken pre-Obamacare. And I think the main thing it had broken was that it put its foot on the scale through the tax code and said, if you get insurance through your employer, you get a big tax break, but if you go buy insurance on your own, you don't. And that created a market that was artificially undermined by government, and the individual part of that market really kind of dried up and ceased to be vibrant.
One of the amazing things to me, Jeff, and I know we have to let you go, but I'm looking at different articles from some people who are satisfied, some who aren't, and some people who will say, "Oh, my policy is going to go up about 10 or 12%. I think I could stay with it." Other people say, "My policy is going up 25%. I can't afford it now. How could I afford that?" But when you see just even the 10 or 12% increases every year, I thought we were supposed to get past that. I thought we were supposed to make this affordable, and it already wasn't affordable. Every year it seems to go up between 10 and 20 and 30% on all these policies, and that's been every year since we've had this discussion over the last 6 years. So it's like, what did we do to the cost of health care? And so I just don't understand what we fixed or how we came about the name or any of this other stuff, but I agree with you completely. Let's just tear it up and find the couple things that really needed to be fixed and fix them. And I bet you, being that the poll has never really dropped below 50% of the people who say, let's get rid of this thing, right, I bet you that people would be backing us on this.
Oh, I think absolutely. There's absolutely no reason why Obamacare should not be repealed and replaced with a conservative alternative that, again, moves things to the right of the pre-Obamacare status quo. The American public, this debate was won in 2009, 2010, and and it just continues to be demonstrated basically at every moment. I mean, the only exception to that was the presidential election of 2012, when you had the unique circumstance of perhaps the one guy in the entire of all the Republican office holders or prior office holders in the entire country, the guy who was probably least well suited to make the case against Obamacare, and he managed to lose. But other than that, at every other turn, the American people have shown their discontentment.
And the funny thing is, he was also the guy who you thought could make the economic argument and didn't. So it was like a double whammy.
Right.
But anyway, well, Jeffrey Anderson, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you again. Of course, folks, you can go to 27project.org to find out more about that stuff. I'm sorry, did I say that wrong?
2017 project, 2017.
Oh, I'm sorry, I may have said that wrong. And also in the Weekly Standard yesterday, he has a piece, the CBO effectively used Gruber's model to score Obamacare, and I'm sure you have many others in there as well. But anyway, again, thank you so much, and we look forward to having you again soon.
Well, thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care.